Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I've got 8 stories pulled from the stillest water. Lake houses deep in Appalachia, where the fog rolls in too thick. Footsteps echo when no one's there. And sometimes, the mirror moves before you do. If you've ever stayed alone in a lake house, or thought you heard someone whisper your name from the shoreline, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and let me know where you're listening from. One of these stories might have happened closer than you think. Thank you for being here. Now then, let's begin. I was Elliot Graves, 37 that year, and for the first time since college, I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I had been a wilderness guide for almost 15 years, mostly in Vermont, leading groups across ridges, rivers, and the occasional glacial scramble. Then one mistake. One misjudged slope. I took my best friend under an avalanche while I was the one holding the map. After that, the mountains felt different. I left my job, turned down every call, and rented a vacant cabin up by Tygart Valley Lake in West Virginia. No cell service, no neighbors, just woods, water, and the sound of birds who didn't care if you carried guilt in your gut. I told myself I needed the quiet to think. The cabin was older than I expected. Cedar siding, warped porch, and a chimney full of old ash. Still, it held together. I spent my mornings hiking near the shoreline and my afternoons reading dog-eared books left behind by whoever owned the place last. Out of habit, I set up a trail cam on the third day. Just one, on a low tree facing the mudflats near the lake edge. I hadn't brought it to study anything in particular. I guess part of me just missed tracking movement, knowing what else shared the woods with me. That night, I reviewed the photos on the tiny screen. A few deer, one fox, then a shot that made my finger freeze. In the frame was a wide patch of mud, and in it, a print I didn't recognize. It was long, deeper than anything a deer would leave, and shaped almost like a foot, but too broad, too flat, and there was nothing in the frame that would have made it. The photo before showed empty ground. The one after, just shadows. I told myself it was a trick of erosion. Maybe the rain distorted an old boot print. Or an elk, though I hadn't seen any sign of them here. I deleted the image and went back to my coffee like it meant nothing. I should have left after that first picture. Should have just turned around, packed my gear, and walked out of that forest. But I needed to know. That instinct never gave me anything worth keeping. 2 days later, it happened again. This time I saw the print with my own eyes. Fresh in the mud, perfectly formed, and alone. No stride, no pattern, just one step, as if whatever made it had stood there for a long while. It looked wrong, too symmetrical, almost like a person had walked barefoot on the edge of the lake, except the toes were all the same size. That same morning, I startled 2 rabbits and a raccoon in the same 10-minute stretch, all of them running from the same direction, toward me, not away from me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch with my boots on and the camera set to send a soft beep if it detected motion. Around 2 a.m., something brushed the edge of the deck. I felt the vibration more than I heard it. Then the alarm chimed once, sharp and lonely in the dark. I picked up the camera, hands already damp. The newest photo loaded slowly. The print was back, only this time, right in front of the lens, as if it had been placed there on purpose. And under it, soaked into the mud, was a photograph, one I had taken myself. It showed the lake from 2 days earlier, but the image was reversed, like someone had printed it backward. I had never printed a single photo since arriving. I stared at it, stunned, while the trees around me stood still as stone. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand. The prints in the mud weren't just near the trail now. They climbed the path all the way up to the edge of the porch. By morning, I had made up my mind to leave. The air inside the cabin felt heavier, as if it had been waiting for me to decide. I packed my backpack with the few things that mattered and zipped it shut. Every sound outside seemed sharper, clearer, a twig snapping, the low ripple of water touching the shore. When I stepped onto the porch, the mud was smooth again. The night's rain had washed away everything, leaving only a faint dark stain where the prints had been. But a new line of them started just beyond the steps, circling around the cabin in one wide arc. They ended behind the woodpile, and then nothing. I told myself they belonged to some animal, maybe a black bear standing oddly, or some trick of runoff. Still, the air felt charged, like before a storm, only there were no clouds and no wind. I slung the camera over my shoulder, turned the compass toward the east, and started walking back the way I had come. The woods should have been familiar by then. I had walked this same route half a dozen times. But after 10 minutes, the compass needle began to twitch, then spin. I tapped the casing, waited, watched it turn again, slower this time, pointing in no direction at all. That was when I heard it, the sound of movement behind me. A soft rhythm, not rushing, not creeping, just there. I turned, expecting to see a deer. The trees were still. The lake glinted through the branches like a mirror that had caught the wrong reflection. I walked faster. The sound followed, faint but steady. Every time I stopped, it stopped. Every time I moved, it came again, matching me. After another mile, I found a flat boulder and sat down to catch my breath. I set the camera beside me, facing the path I had come from. For 10 minutes, I didn't hear a thing. The quiet was so complete that it started to sound like a hum. When I finally looked back down, I decided to check the photos. The screen showed the trees, the path, and a streak of sunlight filtering through. Nothing else. But the last image stopped me cold. It showed me sitting there. Same angle, same rock, taken from behind. The background was right. The light was right. Only I hadn't heard a single sound. I stood up so fast the camera slipped from my hands. My chest tightened until I could hardly breathe. I scanned the tree line, the open slope behind me. Nothing. Only the endless shimmer of the lake below. I went back to the cabin. The trail seemed longer on the way back, the light fading faster than it should have. My mind kept circling the same question. If someone had been close enough to take that photo, how had they moved without leaving a sound? When I reached the muddy section near the shore, I froze. New prints had appeared, clear and wet, the edges sharp, as if just pressed. 2 lines this time, side by side, following the same path I was taking. My path. The air around me went cold. I could hear breathing, close but not mine. A shallow inhale, an unsteady exhale, right beside my ear. I turned. Nothing. But when I looked down, a fresh imprint had formed beside my own boot. Still glistening, still sinking into the mud. That was enough. I ran. I don't remember choosing to. My legs moved on their own, slapping against the wet ground. Breath burning through my throat. The trees blurred past, branches clawing at my jacket as if trying to slow me down. Something moved to my right, not chasing, but pacing me. I stumbled once, felt air shift at my shoulder, the faint chill of fingers almost brushing my arm. The world narrowed to the sound of my pulse and the thud of my boots. I kept running until I reached the clearing, until I saw the old cabin again through the trees. The prints stopped just short of the porch. I didn't stop to check the rest. I grabbed what I could carry and drove until the forest was gone from the rearview mirror. I never went back to Tigard Valley. I deleted every file, every photograph I had taken there. But it didn't end. Sometimes, when I unlock my phone, the camera turns on by itself. The screen shows my face for a second before the shutter clicks. I never touch the button. And when I check my gallery later, the photos are always the same. Me, standing near the lake, with a shape just behind my shoulder, something that never quite comes into focus. I was Jesse Marlin, 25, and that summer was the last time all four of us were together. Me, Tyler, Mo, and Kira, college friends, who somehow kept finding our way back to each other, even after jobs and new cities started pulling us apart. We decided to meet up one more time before real life got too heavy. Tyler brought the idea. He had read something online about an old ranger cabin by Buckhorn Lake, deep in the woods, supposedly abandoned since the late 60s, left to rot. He said it would be perfect. No tourists, no campers, just us and the lake. The kind of place you could make a memory in. The place looked worse than I expected. Wood slats bowed out like ribs, moss crawling up the door frame, windows smeared with decades of grime. Inside, it smelled like wet paper and ash. But the roof held and the floor didn't cave. So we set up camp. Tyler made a rule the first night. He was always that guy, the one who liked turning dumb ideas into rituals. No pointing your flashlight into the woods, he said, because, as he put it, if you shine your light long enough, the woods shine back. Izzy wane. You ever stand in the trees, beam your light into the dark, and realize what's glowing isn't bark or leaves, but eyes? If you haven't, don't try it. The first night, we stayed up late, drinking too much and laughing too hard. Then Kira went quiet. She was staring out the broken window, her face half lit by the fire. She said she saw a flicker in the trees. A light, low and slow, like someone holding a flashlight and pacing between trunks. Not fireflies, not moonlight, something directed. Mo joked it was a reflection from our own gear. I agreed, just to keep the mood from turning. But that night, I double-checked the door lock before sleeping. The kind of cabin latch that barely counts, but better than nothing. By the third day, we started getting on each other's nerves. Mo was tired of cooking. Kira kept walking off alone to take pictures. Tyler got quiet, not moody, just distant. He said he wanted to explore the shoreline on his own. He came back near dusk with dry shoes. Kira noticed it first. She asked him why his sneakers were clean if he'd been walking the banks. He shrugged, said maybe it hadn't been that muddy, then changed the subject. That night, I stepped outside to use the bathroom. The trees were still, no wind. When I looked up toward the deck, I saw Tyler standing at the edge, holding his flashlight out toward the woods. The beam didn't waver. He was frozen there, staring into the trees. I called his name. He didn't flinch. I called again, louder. This time, he turned, slow and stiff, like waking from a long thought. He smiled, but didn't say anything. Later, when I came back to our room, something was off. My flashlight had been turned on and left on the pillow, beam aimed straight up. I hadn't touched it since morning. Mo was pacing, frustrated. Her pack had been opened. Food missing, clothes scattered. Kira was helping her sort through it. I stepped outside again, needing air. That was when I saw it. Another light, not ours, sweeping sideways through the trees, about 30 yards out. Not bouncing like someone walking. Smooth, careful. And I knew right then we weren't alone anymore. The light in the trees stayed for almost a full minute before it blinked out. None of us spoke after that. When I went back inside, Tyler was sitting by the fireplace with his flashlight in his lap, running his thumb over the lens as if checking for scratches. Kira whispered that we should leave in the morning, but Tyler just shook his head. He said someone was helping him keep watch. The way he said it made the hair on my arms lift, like it was already decided that the person out there wasn't a stranger, but someone he knew. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound died before it left my throat. Mo finally snapped. She grabbed her phone and said she was going down by the lake to try for a signal. I told her to stay close, but she was already halfway out the door. muttering that we were all losing it. The air after she left felt heavier, almost like the cabin was listening. Kira and I argued about waking Tyler and forcing him to go. She said his behavior scared her. I agreed, but neither of us wanted to touch him. He sat completely still, staring toward the door, flashlight resting on his knee. I thought he was asleep until I saw his eyes open. Mo came back 20 minutes later, shaking. She said she had heard someone calling her name near the water, not yelling, just repeating it calmly. A man's voice, too close to be an echo. She hadn't seen anyone but could hear leaves shifting as she ran back. We locked every door and pushed a table against the front. Tyler didn't help. He just said quietly, "They are already here. Thanks for watching." For a while nothing happened. The storm outside had passed, and even the frogs were quiet. I started to believe maybe we were only feeding off each other's fear. We turned off the lights, sat in a small circle, and waited for the sun. That was when the back door creaked open. The beam of a flashlight cut through the dark, sliding over the walls and stopping on the hallway. The light belonged to Tyler. He was standing with his back to us, blocking the doorway, his shoulders rising and falling as if he were whispering to someone we couldn't see. I stood up slowly. My legs were trembling, but I took a few steps toward him. "Tyler," I said. He turned his head halfway, and his voice came out flat. "Do you see it now?" "I think you are losing or pribk." Then another shadow passed behind him, fast enough that the air stirred against my arm. The next second is chaos. The flashlight slips from Tyler's hand and rolls across the floor. I dive for Kira, pulling her toward the exit, but something brushes my shoulder. A body, moving too quick, too close. The light hits bare feet as they vanish down the stairwell. We didn't stop to look. Mo kicked the barricade aside, and we burst through the door into the cold. The forest swallowed us. Our own flashlights swung wildly, carving white paths through the trees until my breath burned and I couldn't hear anything but running water. When the police found us the next afternoon, they said the cabin looked older than it should. Dust in places we had cleaned. Layers of footprints. Some ours, some not. No sign of Tyler. We tried to explain what happened, but the words felt thin. They told us it was probably squatters, maybe locals using the place to hide. We nodded and let them believe it. Mo left the state within a month. Kira and I still see each other sometimes. Quiet dinners. Short visits. We light candles instead of using our phones for light. Never LED. Never that cold, white glow. Because when the beam hits a window or a dark patch of forest, it reflects something back that looks almost human. And once you've seen it, you start to wonder if it ever really left. Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. I was Lucas Wren, 31, 3 weeks out from my wedding day when I found myself knee-deep in brush and rock, chasing a mistake we both swore didn't matter. Emily had dropped the ring during a hike along Beach Fork Lake. It slipped right off her hand while she leaned over a narrow rock ledge to splash water on her face. 1 second it was there. The next it was gone, vanishing into the ravine below. We sat in silence for a minute after it happened. She said it wasn't a big deal, that the ring was just a symbol, not the real thing. But I saw the way her fingers kept touching the bare space where it used to sit. So I told her I'd go back and find it. I returned alone 3 days later. I brought gear, maps, rope, a headlamp, and a cheap tent. The area wasn't popular for hiking. Too many sharp drops and loose shale. That suited me fine. I didn't want company. The first night passed quietly. Mostly crickets, a few owls, the occasional drip of water from the rocks above. But just before I fell asleep, I heard a low thump, like a stone hitting another, followed by a faint shuffle. I turned on the flashlight and scanned the ravine. Nothing moved. I told myself it was probably a raccoon, or maybe a small slide of loose gravel. Nothing unusual for a gorge like this. Still, I zipped the tent fully closed and kept the flashlight within reach. Old habits from camping trips came back quickly. The next morning, I climbed down the first few ledges and scouted the base. The drop wasn't as deep as I feared, maybe 15 feet to the first flat, then another slope toward the water. I spent most of the day clearing brush and building a stable anchor point. As I worked, I kept thinking about the look on Emily's face when the ring slipped away. By early evening, I spotted something metallic reflecting sunlight through the trees. I scrambled down to it, but it wasn't the ring. It was an old bottle cap, rusted, set carefully on a patch of dry stone. Too clean, too placed. It didn't make sense. The area was slick and cluttered with moss and shale. There was no reason for that spot to be so clear, unless someone had swept it recently. I stood still for a moment, listening, heard nothing but wind in the branches above. That night, I didn't sleep as well. Around midnight, I heard footsteps near the tent. Slow, deliberate, shifting over dry leaves. I called out. No answer. When I unzipped the flap, there was only darkness, thick and silent. In the morning, my topo map was gone. I had left it folded beside my pack inside the tent. In its place, just outside the entrance, someone had stuck a twig vertically into the mud. It stood perfectly upright at the narrowest point of the trail, leading into the ravine. I knew what it meant, though I didn't want to say it aloud. Someone else was here, watching, maybe even following. I should have packed up then, turned back, told Emily it was impossible, but I didn't. I tightened the rope harness, clipped the carabiners, and started the descent. The rock was slick from last night's rain, and halfway down, I slipped. My shoulders slammed into the wall before I hit a tangle of brush that broke the fall. I lay there for a few seconds, trying to catch my breath, tasting dirt and copper. My right leg throbbed, but it held when I stood. I turned on the flashlight and swept it across the base of the ravine. Pools of water shimmered between stones, little flashes of silver. Then, near the edge, where the runoff met a small bend, I saw it, something small and bright wedged into a crevice. The ring. I almost laughed. My heart pounded, relief rushing in too fast. I crouched and reached for it, fingers trembling. It was cold, cleaner than it had any right to be after 3 days in the dirt. I brushed the mud off and slipped it into my pocket. That was when a rock whistled past my ear and smashed against the ground beside me. The echo hit like thunder. It hadn't fallen. The angle was wrong. It came from above, deliberate, as if someone had thrown it. I snapped my head up. The rim of the ravine loomed overhead, jagged against the light. For half a second, I saw movement. A dark outline leaned forward, then vanished behind the ridge. I shouted, but the sound broke against the walls. My own voice came back thin and distant. No answer followed. The forest above was quiet again, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I clipped my harness and tested the rope, but it gave almost immediately. The line had been cut halfway through. I stared at the frayed fibers, heart sinking. There was no way to climb the same path again. So I went left, hugging the rock wall, looking for a slope I could scramble. The ground narrowed, slick with moss. Every few steps, I heard loose gravel shifting behind me, matching my pace but never close enough to see. I stopped once. The sound stopped too. I started moving faster. My flashlight beam caught a shallow incline ahead, a way out if I could climb fast enough. But when I reached it, something moved in the shadow of the rocks below me. Slow, dragging footsteps against the water. I turned the light toward the sound. At first, nothing. Then a flash of skin. A hand, pale and slick, reaching from a hollow between stones. The fingers curled around my wrist before I could react. The skin was cold, wet, and strong. I panicked. My mind blanked. Instinct took over. I pulled back hard, twisting, and brought my elbow down with everything I had. There was a grunt, a splash, then silence. I stumbled up the rocks, half crawling, half sliding, lungs burning. The flashlight wobbled in my grip, throwing light over the walls, the moss, the dark water below. Nothing moved now. When I reached the top, I didn't look back. I ran until the ravine disappeared behind the trees. My legs shook so badly I dropped to my knees near the trailhead, gasping for air. The ring felt heavy in my pocket, heavier than it should have. I went home the next morning. Emily cried when she saw the ring. I told her I had slipped, that it was nothing serious. She smiled and hugged me, but I couldn't meet her eyes. I never wore the band again. It sits in a box on my dresser, clean and perfect. But sometimes, when I pick it up, the metal feels damp, like it has just been pulled from the river. And, if I hold it too long, I swear I can feel a pulse. I was Rachel Morin, 28, when Jonah first brought up Flatwoods. The name alone made my stomach tighten. My uncle disappeared near there when I was 14, working a late shift at a mine that shouldn't have been open. They said it was probably a cave-in, but no one ever found his body. 14 years later, I found myself standing beside Jonah at the edge of that same forest, staring out at the lake like it might give us an answer. He was into old geology maps, mining records, anything that looked forgotten. He said there was a mine nearby that never got properly sealed after the last accident. He wanted to see it for himself. I said yes, but only because part of me wanted to stop seeing it in dreams. If I could stand there, if I could walk those paths without anything happening, maybe the past would stay buried. We pitched our tent on high ground near the tree line, overlooking the water Jonah cooked at. I tried not to flinch at every bird call that sounded too human. That first night, he stopped mid-sentence and tilted his head. He said he heard something, a metallic howl, soft and slow, from deep in the trees. I listened. All I heard was wind and water. He swore it came again, exactly the same pitch, like a distant train whistle scraping metal. 3 times, then nothing. We argued a little. I told him it was probably air pressure moving through old pipes under the lake bed. He looked disappointed, like I was missing something important. That was Jonah. He believed sound had shape, meaning intent. And once he heard something strange, he couldn't let it go. The next morning, he started recording. He used his phone, an old field mic, even a parabolic dish he brought from his garage. Every night, he'd replay the recordings through his headphones, adjusting filters and scribbling notes in his journal. The longer he listened, the more convinced he became there were words buried in the noise. I thought I had forgotten what it felt like to lose someone in these woods. But as Jonah leaned closer to every echo, I realized I wasn't listening for something new. I was waiting for a voice I already knew, one I hadn't heard since I was a child. By the 4th night, I had enough. I told him we should leave, that this wasn't healthy. He barely looked up, just mumbled that he was close. While packing up some gear, I found an old folded map at the bottom of his bag. There was a mark in pencil that read, Shaft 6, collapsed, 1,987. Anywhere consistent. I held it in front of him and waited. He didn't lie, just looked guilty. Said he wasn't going to go in, only wanted to get close, to see where the sound really came from. I told him I would leave on my own if he didn't stop. He promised just one more night. I said fine, and sat by the fire in silence. That was when we heard it. A sharp, hollow crack, like stone shifting underground. Jonah grabbed his flashlight and ran toward the trees. I cursed and followed. The sound echoed again, low and wide, as if the forest itself had opened a lung. I found him standing at the edge of a clearing, staring at a rusted gate half buried in ivy and mud. A section of the hillside had crumbled away, revealing a slanted opening lined with warped timber. The remains of a warning sign lay flat in the grass. Jonah turned to me, eyes wide. "You hear it now, don't you?" he said. "They're still in there." I shook my head, told him we needed to go. But then the sound came again, this time right beside me. It was a whisper, not quite a word, pulled through rusted metal. And for the first time, I heard it too. Jonah stepped through the broken gate like it had been waiting for him. I grabbed his arm, begged him to stop, but he shook me off gently and kept walking. His flashlight cut through the damp air inside the mine, illuminating crumbled beams and graffiti scrawled decades ago. The deeper he went, the more his voice changed. Lower, calmer, almost like he was answering someone. I stood at the entrance, torn between fear and something worse. Recognition. I had dreamed about a tunnel like this when I was young, long before I knew it was real. The shape of it felt familiar, like stepping into a memory I didn't know I had. Jonah's voice echoed from inside. "There's a slope," he called. "It goes down farther than I thought." Then he said something else, something that made my chest seize. "They're saying your name, and to stay." I stepped inside. The mine swallowed the light behind me. Water dripped from somewhere above. The floor sloped downward, uneven and soft in places, like it had been shifting over time. I followed the beam of my flashlight until I saw him, crouched near the wall, whispering. His hands were shaking. I knelt beside him and took his face in my hands. He looked at me like he was waking from a long dream. I told him we needed to go. He nodded once, slowly, and we backed our way toward the entrance. Neither of us spoke on the walk back to camp. At the tent, Jonah packed away his gear without a word. He deleted every recording, tore up the map, and tossed it into the fire. "It was nothing," he said. "Probably stress, lack of sleep, the afterdoxes." I wanted to believe him. For the first time in days, I felt like we could leave it behind. We lay in the dark, listening to the soft lap of water against the edge of the lake. I fell asleep thinking maybe it was over. I woke to an empty tent. Jonah's pack was still there, but his boots were gone. I stepped outside, heart pounding. The moon had dipped behind the clouds, and fog curled low along the shore. I scanned the clearing and found him standing near the rocks, just at the water's edge. He didn't turn when I called his name. His flashlight was off, his arms loose at his sides. I walked slowly toward him. "Jonah?" I said again. He spoke without moving. "It's back." The voice. But now it says your name. Is Howard Abal. Then the wind shifted, and I heard it too. A long, low call from somewhere beyond the trees. It didn't echo. It pulled. A metallic whisper stretched into 2 syllables. "Rachel, down." They Sylv, when the reaction that with. I ran to him, grabbed his arm. His skin was cold. He resisted, barely. His legs buckled as I yanked him backward, and we both fell to our knees in the mud. He didn't speak after that, just cried, not loudly, but broken, breathless, as if he had used up all his strength, hearing something I couldn't bear to imagine. We left the next morning. He never listened to recordings again. No more geology podcasts. No late-night map research. But he never really came back either. Some nights, I hear him whisper in his sleep. Not afraid, just tired. He says it was never them speaking. It was his own voice, coming back to him through the dark. As for me, I can't be near caves anymore. Not even tour caverns or echo chambers. If someone calls my name in a place like that, I freeze. Because deep down, I still don't know if the answer will come from someone I love, or something else entirely. I was Andrew Rowe, 36, and I had just lost my job of nearly a decade when Nina suggested we rent the cabin. A week away, just the 2 of us, near Summersville Lake where the air was clean and the signal barely reached. She said it would give us a reset. I didn't argue. The place was cozy in that curated, forgotten way. Wooden walls, a fireplace that creaked in the evenings, and a wraparound porch with 2 old chairs we never used. We had no real plan. She liked to walk in the mornings. He said it helped clear her mind. I stayed behind and cooked. The morning it started, I had just finished scrambling eggs. I checked my phone, half thinking I'd scroll through our photos before she got back. But the most recent picture, the one I took of her by the lakeside rock the day before, was gone. Not moved, not blurry, just missing. I searched everywhere. Trash bin, cloud backup, synced folders. Nothing. I even tried restarting the phone. Still nothing. Nina came back a few minutes later with a light layer of sweat and a handful of leaves. When I asked her about it, she just laughed. Said I probably deleted it by accident or tapped the wrong thing. She kissed me on the forehead and went to shower. I wanted to let it go. But the next morning, 2 more were gone. One of us in front of the fireplace. One of her holding that bottle of wine she said tasted like bad berries. This time, I remembered taking them. I remembered the exact moment, the exact frame, but they were just not there. I downloaded recovery software that evening. It pulled a few corrupted files from the cache. One photo came back partially. It was me, smiling at the camera with the fire glowing behind me. But the couch beside me, where Nina had been curled up, was now empty. That night, I stared at her across the table. Her hair was damp, and she picked at her food like always, humming low under her breath. I started asking questions. What kind of birds did she see on her walks? Had she noticed the sky changing the last few mornings? Her answers came slow, vague, like she was thinking about something else entirely. When I pressed, she got quiet, said I was being weird, then went to bed early. If you're hearing this on your own phone right now, do something for me. Open your gallery. Find a photo you know used to have 2 people in it. Just check. Make sure you're still in it together. The next morning, the bed was empty. At first, I thought Nina had gone for an early walk, but the cabin door was slightly ajar. Her shoes were gone, but her phone sat charging on the kitchen counter. I called her name outside. Once, then again. Nothing. I checked the shoreline, the path she always took. Still nothing. My chest began to tighten in a way I couldn't control. Back inside, I opened my photo library again. The very first picture from our trip, Nina standing beside the rental car with her hand raised in a wave, had changed. She was facing away now, her hand down at her side. I scrolled through the rest, one by one. Her face blurred, then her body softened at the edges. Some were just me now, smiling at a camera she used to hold. My hands were shaking. The lights flickered once, then twice. My signal bar dropped to 0. I grabbed my keys and got in the car, determined to find help or at least get back into cell range. The road out felt longer than I remembered. Trees leaned in tighter, and the dirt path curved in ways that hadn't been there before. My GPS spun for a few seconds, then froze. After 20 minutes, I turned back. The cabin looked the same at first, but something was off. Nina's bag was gone, her sweater from the back of the couch, missing, like she had never unpacked it all. I powered on my laptop out of desperation. Maybe the files had backed up automatically. A new folder blinked into existence as soon as the screen lit. RAW X1. I didn't create it. Inside were dozens of images, all of them of me. No selfies, no portraits, just still frames. Me, cooking, sitting, walking along the porch. Always alone, always centered. I clicked through faster, heart pounding. That night, the lights in the cabin stopped flickering. Everything was steady again. Too steady. I made dinner and poured a glass of wine out of habit. Told myself Nina had probably left after another argument. Maybe to teach me a lesson. I looked down at my phone. A new photo had appeared. It showed me sitting at the table with the wine glass raised, smiling, but I hadn't taken it. I didn't remember that moment. I looked up from the screen, and my breath caught. Nina was standing in the doorway. She didn't speak, just stared at me with a soft expression, like something unfinished. Her hands stayed at her sides. Her mouth curved slightly upward, but her eyes didn't match the smile. I got up slowly, walked toward her. Each step felt like it was happening in a dream, weightless and wrong. I reached for her and felt nothing but cold. She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft, like a breath against my ear. I was never here with you. Andrew, this is a probably Mastins, with you kinda bad alike, in the Ross. The room swayed. I stumbled backward, collapsing into the chair. My head spun. The photographs, the silence, the way her phone never rang. All of it. Then darkness. The last thing I saw was my phone lighting up on the table, displaying a single image. Me, sitting alone. Behind me, barely visible, was a figure blurred at the edges, just close enough to cast a shadow. I woke with the sun. The cabin was still. My mouth tasted like metal. I checked my phone. It had reset itself overnight. Only one photo remained. It showed me smiling in front of a mirror, no one else in frame. In the bottom corner, a short line of text read, "Found device. Synced successfully." That one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. Now, story 6. I was Cal Thomas, 41, working field surveys for a nonprofit focused on reforestation and soil health. Most of my job involved hiking into overgrown places, taking samples, logging tree health, and trying to figure out which tracts of land were still worth saving. That fall, I was assigned to the woods surrounding Moncove Lake, part of a proposed conservation zone in Greenbrier County. It was the kind of place you had to drive into for 2 hours and then hike the rest on foot. I was alone. That was typical for my work, and I didn't mind. The woods around Moncove were still thick and damp, with a sweet rot in the air and trails that hadn't seen boots in months. I pitched camp in a lean-to cabin near the edge of the property, a place barely held together by lichen and rusted nails. On the second day of surveying, while logging tree decay rates near the lower slope, I saw something that didn't match the rest of the forest. About chest high on the trunk of an old white oak, someone had carved a pattern, a lozenge shape with crisscrossing lines. It wasn't natural. The lines were too deliberate. At first, I figured it was the usual, campers, teens, maybe someone marking territory or leaving a trail. I made a note and moved on. But the next day, I found the exact same symbol on 3 more trees, all perfectly spaced, exactly 40 steps apart, same size, same orientation. I paused longer this time. The carvings weren't deep, but they were sharp, fresh. Whoever made them had used a steady hand and a sharp blade. I checked for other markings, initials, trail flags, maybe surveyor tape. Nothing, just the repeating symbol. I started to wonder if they were old, maybe some kind of boundary marker from decades ago, passed down and copied without context. I took photos, logged the GPS points, and circled them on my topo map for follow-up. That night, the woods around the cabin were especially quiet. No wind, no insects, just the occasional groan of the roof shifting as the temperature dropped. I made tea, read by lantern light, and tried to push the carvings out of my head. Somewhere past midnight, I heard it, a tap, then another, soft, deliberate, like someone tapping a knife against wood. I got up, stepped to the door, and shined my headlamp into the trees. The beam cut through mist and shadows. Nothing moved. No footprints. No breeze. In the morning, I stepped outside and froze. On the oak tree 10 feet from the cabin, a new carving. The same pattern. Crisp and clean. Not there yesterday. At its base lay a splintered piece of branch with a slice carved down the middle, like someone had tested their blade on it. I didn't pack up. I should have, but my instinct kicked in the way it always did during surveys. Document first. Assess risk later. I marked the new carving, photographed the slice of wood, then set off deeper into the trees, following the same 40-step spacing. Each mark was identical, cut with the same angle and depth. The trail began to arc slightly, the trees forming a gradual spiral through the undergrowth. I traced the pattern inward for nearly 2 hours. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest became. No birds, no wind, just the soft crunch of my boots and the occasional snap of dry bark. My GPS started to act strange around the 5th loop. The compass spun without settling. I chalked it up to interference and used red spray paint to mark trees behind me, a backup in case I needed to retrace my steps. After another turn in the spiral, I took a break and drank some water. When I stood to head back, the red markings were gone. Not faded. Gone. The bark was clean, like it had never been touched. I spun around and saw only more of the same symbol, like it was folding in on itself. I pushed forward. Eventually, the spiral ended. The trees around me were thin and dying. A ring of them, their leaves brittle, their bark gray. Each one bore the same mark, but flipped upside down. In the center of the ring sat a stone. It was wide, flat, and sunken into the ground. Moss covered most of its face, but beneath the green, I could see carvings, dozens, maybe hundreds, layered atop each other like fish scales, all the same repeating pattern. I knelt to brush the moss aside, heart beating faster now. Something about the stone felt too intentional, like it had been placed there for someone to find. That was when I saw it. Near the base, half concealed by dirt and green, a name, my name, carved in the same hand, Cal T, but unfinished. The letters faded midway, like the hand had been interrupted. I stood up so fast I stumbled. My boot caught on a thick root, and I fell backward, palms slapping mud. Behind me, a trunk caught my fall, and there, at shoulder height, was another fresh carving, so fresh that sap still welled at the edges. The blade had only just been lifted. I backed away, step by step, not caring about the path anymore. I moved until I saw sunlight again. I did not stop for breaks. I did not look over my shoulder. I never returned to Moncove after that. 2 weeks later, a woman from the conservation office called to ask if I had started a new marker system. She said my carvings had shown up in 5 other forest parcels. Same pattern, same spacing, some less than 40 miles from where I had been. I told her I had never carried a blade, that I had only documented what I found. She didn't press. Now, every time I pass a tree with peeling bark, I stop for half a second longer than I should, just long enough to wonder if I will see that first line forming, that shallow diagonal, the start of something that already knows my name. I was Naomi Blair, 33, and this was supposed to be both work and a break. 3 days hiking along the outer edge of Bluestone Lake, collecting water samples, logging erosion patterns, and giving my younger sister Lila a taste of what I actually did for a living. Grant, my husband, came along because he needed air. Eddie tagged on because he and Grant used to be close in college and hadn't seen each other since the pandemic. We set up camp at a bend in the forest where a small creek fed into the lake. It was colder than expected, but Lila found it peaceful. She was crouched near the roots of an old tree when she spotted the journal, tucked in a plastic sleeve, wedged between 2 mossy roots. The cover had water stains, but the inside was dry. It started like any other field log. Notes about tree species. 3 measurements. Then, the weather. Sunny and cold. Wind from the west. All of it matched what we had written in our own notebooks that day. But the date at the top of the page was from 2011. I laughed at first, thinking maybe it was a prop or a forgotten geocache. Eddie said it was probably an old camper's prank. But then I flipped a few pages and froze. There was a short paragraph about someone named Grant. Tall, green cap, quiet. Grant was wearing a green cap. When I showed him the page, he just shrugged, said he wasn't interested in reading some weird bush diary. But that night, I caught him holding the journal by the fire, flipping through it slowly, jaw tight. He closed it quick when I got close. The next morning, Eddie was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, his pack half-zipped, boots missing. At first, we thought he had gone to relieve himself or look for firewood. But an hour passed, then 2. We split up and circled the area, calling his name. Lila was pale and silent. When I came back to camp, I found the journal in the center of our tent. It was open to a fresh page. The date was today's. And under it, in the same narrow handwriting, were the words, "Eddie did not listen. Gone now. Is be never," conically. I should have hidden that journal the moment we found it. Something in the writing, flat and clean, like it had already accepted what would happen, made me feel cold in a way I could not shake. Grant said it had to be some elaborate prank. Lila wanted to leave immediately. I agreed. We packed what we could and started back toward the trailhead. The air had shifted. Every step felt slower. When we passed the creek again, I saw something caught under a thick root. It was Eddie's backpack, half buried in mud, zipper torn wide open, one strap sliced clean through, like with a blade. We didn't speak. We just kept walking. When we returned to camp to grab the last of our gear, the journal was back in the tent, lying flat on Grant's sleeping pad. Open once more. It read, "Lila, afraid. Naomi, still reading. Jabes, no one." Grant said he was done. He grabbed the journal, poured lighter fluid over the cover, and struck a match. The flames flared up around the edges, but the pages curled without charring. The ink did not blur. The fire burned out around it like water dodging oil. We buried it instead, dug a hole near the edge of the creek, shoved the book inside, covered it with soil and a stone. Then we walked, fast and tense, trying to find enough signal to call out. The clouds had thickened. Rain started to fall by mid-afternoon, turning the trail into sludge. Lila slipped first, cutting her palm. I helped her up while Grant walked ahead. When I caught up, he was staring at something in the mud. A print, shallow but wide, with too many finger lines, smeared into the earth. Not animal, not quite human. We turned back just before dusk. When we reached camp, Eddie was there. He stood by the fire pit like he had never left. Same boots, same clothes. His face dry, despite the rain. But something was wrong with his eyes. Glassy, and blinking too slowly. We asked where he had gone. He smiled, said, "The journal wrote it, so I went." And Biston, he didn't eat, didn't sit. After a while, he walked into the woods again, and none of us followed. We barricaded the tent that night. I kept my hand around Lila's wrist, just so I knew she was still beside me. Grant lay still. No one talked. Outside, something moved now and then, slow and heavy, circling the edges of the clearing. Near midnight, I woke to rustling. Grant's sleeping bag was empty. I grabbed the flashlight and the shovel and ran to the creek. It was colder now, the kind of cold that burns skin. I stumbled on something submerged. It was Grant, tied at the wrists with wet vines, eyes wide. I dropped the flashlight, pulled him up, shaking. He whispered one word, "Behind." A figure lunged from the brush, pale and low to the ground. I swung the journal. Yes, the same one I had buried, and hurled it into the creek. The scream that followed was not human. The figure reeled back, writhing, retreating into the black trees. Lila appeared, barefoot and panicked, yanked us both toward shore. Something caught my jacket, a hand, or a root, or something colder, but I broke free before it pulled me under. We never found Eddie again. Grant stayed silent for weeks after, slept only in daylight. Lila quit her job, moved out west, never returned my calls. And the journal, it came back. Someone mailed it to the front desk of a roadside motel 40 miles north. No return address. Same water-stained cover. Same ink. First page now held a new line. Naomi knows. Still remembering. Will return. Their fast street. I was Marcus Hinton, 39, a digital designer buried under deadlines and change requests until I nearly caused a fatal accident at work. That near miss cracked something in me. I rented a cabin near Sutton, West Virginia, told myself I'd unplug and breathe again. The place was old and quiet, isolated by forest and lake, perfect for disappearing. Inside the cabin there was one odd fixture, a wall-mounted mirror right beside the kitchen. It was tall but not wide, frame chipped and paint peeling. The glass looked old, blurry at the edges, and even when the air was dry, the surface seemed misted. I chalked it up to age, or cheap materials. On the first night, I noticed the reflection was slightly off. I stood still, checking a scratch on my chin from where my fingers had slipped against a table edge earlier. In the mirror, I saw myself, but the scratch looked healed. My face was smooth. I blinked and looked again. The mirror showed a version of me in the past. Whole, clean, unaffected. I shook my head. I must be tired, I muttered to myself. I came closer and wiped the glass. A thin film of condensation appeared, even though I had the heater on full. I wiped again. The film returned. I tried wiping with a dry cloth, then my shirt sleeve. Nothing changed. At one point I turned on the kitchen light. It was a warm yellow tone, and compared my reflection to the mirror. The mirror showed white light. Cool tone. My shirt looked pale blue in the real world but showed gray in the reflection. I laughed quietly. Maybe this is antidote cabin. I said, all the stress leaves you different. In a way, but the moment felt wrong. I stepped back, and in the frame of the mirror I saw something flicker behind me in the reflection. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty cabin. Windows. Dark. I looked back at the mirror. The flicker was gone. The reflection was just me, still and silent. I told myself I would sleep well tonight. I locked the door, closed the curtains, and turned off the lights. I lay down on the sofa in the living room, looked towards the mirror in the dim glow. Emptiness. And then I saw it. The reflection's mouth curved into a faint smile. I did not smile. My heart raced. I stayed perfectly still. Finally, I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the smile was gone. I told myself I was imagining it. Exhausted. Cabin illusions. I tried to sleep, but the mirror's presence hovered in my mind. The next morning, I draped a towel over the mirror. It slid off twice, like the glass was too slick or the fabric resisted staying still. I pressed it in place again and left for a walk around the lake, hoping fresh air would settle my nerves. But even in the woods, I kept thinking about that faint smile and how it felt just slightly delayed. When I came back in the afternoon, the towel was on the floor, not crumpled, but laid flat, as if someone had smoothed it out. I tested the mirror again, moved slowly, lifted my hand. The reflection followed, but the timing was off by a second or two, just enough to be wrong. I drew a black line across the glass with a dry erase marker. The reflection mirrored the gesture, but my line was straight, while its version was crooked. My hand shook. I wiped both lines away, but a faint trail of the distorted one remained, like residue behind glass. That night I planned to leave. I packed my bag, tried to start the car. Nothing. Battery dead. My phone had drained to 1% and wouldn't charge, even on a new cable. I wasn't scared yet. Not really. But I stayed in the living room with the mirror behind me and wrote in a notebook, refusing to look back. For a while, it felt quiet. Just the wind in the trees and the creak of the cabin settling. But when I got up to use the bathroom, I saw my reflection still sitting at the table. It sat still, arms on the wood, head tilted, watching the page I had written. It had not moved with me. I backed away slowly. The reflection blinked, turned its head away from the table, and walked toward the edge of the frame, toward a part of the mirror that showed no room, no door, nothing that existed in the real cabin. It walked left, into fog, and vanished. I ran to the mirror and stared. My breath fogged the glass. My own face appeared again, expressionless. I raised my hand. The reflection followed, on time. Now, almost convincing. Almost. But I saw it in the eyes. That slight flicker, like a thought I had not had yet. I stood frozen. Then the reflection raised its hand, not to mimic me, but to press against the inside of the glass. It opened its mouth slowly, deliberately, and mouthed a word, my name. I did not move. My breath caught. The mirror cracked. Just once. Thin, like a tree branch, splitting from the center, outward. The sound rang like ice snapping in a frozen lake. A gust of cold air swept through the cabin, lifting paper, rattling the door frame, but every window was shut. I stepped back, heart pounding. The mirror dark now, the reflection gone. At first light, I left. 3 days later, back home in Charleston, I unboxed a new bathroom mirror from the store. Clean surface, no strange frame. I hung it above the sink, turned away, then turned back. And there it was, a faint branch-like crack in the upper left corner. No reason, no cause, but it was there, and I have not looked into it since. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.